Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for being here with us. This is the Thrive Bites podcast, and welcome to season 5. Here we talk about 3 things: plant-powered living, enhancing emotional resilience, and creating a thriving mindset. And I interview the most passionate guests here, ranging from physicians to coaches to dietitians to entrepreneurs. And my hope is to give you really informative and high-valued conversations. So please follow us here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and wherever you hear your podcasts. Come on in, and I can't wait to see you inside. Hey guys, it's Dr. Colin Zhu, aka the Chef Doc, and welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites podcast. And I'm joined by Dr. Chef Linda Shiue, and she is the author of Spicebox Kitchen: Eat Well and Be Healthy with globally inspired vegetable-forward recipes. And that's already been released. And we have a wonderful conversation about culinary medicine and what is going on in the food world and how can we make it healthier, for us, and what is it going on in the healthcare world, and how do we make it so we are less sick and more well. And so our conversation centers around what is culinary medicine and what is going on in the food world, and how do we make it more healthy for us, and what is going on in the healthcare world, and how do we, gravitate towards being less sick for us and be more well. So it's a wonderful conversation. She is a pioneer in the culinary world and the lifestyle medicine world, and you don't want to miss this. And she has a special recipe demo for us as well. And I'll see you inside. Okay, guys. Well, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for being here with us. You could have been anywhere in the world, and you decided to share your precious moments with us today. And I'm very, very, very appreciative and grateful. So I have a wonderful, wonderful guest with us today. I am so happy and elated that she is taking time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. Her name is Dr. Linda Shiue, and she is an internal medicine physician. She's also a chef and the first director of culinary medicine at Kaiser Permanente San Francisco, where she founded Thrive Kitchen, which is a teaching kitchen for patients. And she believes that the best medicine is prevention. And her cooking classes showcase seasonal produce. She lavishly flavors them with spices and fresh herbs. And her food writing has been published widely and has been interviewed frequently on television and in print. Her first cookbook, Spicebox Kitchen: Eat Well and Be Healthy with globally inspired vegetable-forward recipes, was published in March 2021. And she's currently on the faculty at Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine and previously at UCSF and Stanford University, and serves on the boards of San Francisco Marin Food Bank, Meals on Wheels San Francisco, and the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Linda. Hello.
Hi, Colin. Good to see you.
So good to see you. I've had the great pleasure of seeing you in person. So it's really, really nice to kind of do this backwards, Usually you do this like virtually and then you hope to cross paths like in person. Right. So thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you are such a busy, woman. And so I greatly, greatly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Can you share with the audience where you're calling from today?
San Francisco, California.
All right. How is SF nowadays?
It's really bright and clean today because it rained, which was quite unusual all day yesterday. So yeah, it's pretty good. Opening up, more stuff getting sort of back to normal. Yes. Especially the food, right? Because it's it's all about the food, and I know SF is a huge mecca for it. So I actually haven't been in quite a while, so I'm gonna have to pay you a trip soon. Yeah, I'll take you on a food tour.
Yes. So I know that today we're going to be going into a little bit of origin story, some interview questions, and then we're going to go transition to a demo. So I'm super excited about that. So my first question usually I like to ask is, what is the origin story? How did you go from point A to point B? You're a doctor and you're also a chef. So instead of asking you, how did you, find yourself in culinary medicine? My first question would be, what was the moment for you that sparked the light bulb to say like, hey, I got to do something different. I don't know how, I don't know what blueprint I have to follow, but I feel called to go on this path. What was that moment for you?
I love that question, Colin. And I know we've been chatting about how I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. Like I kind of like to stick to what's known and what's safe and what's been done before. So it's pretty uncharacteristic and significant that I did this in a very big way. And this is 10 years ago. And it really truly was a moment. I was at a culinary medicine course called the Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives, which is held annually in Napa, California. And it's a CME course where it brings together the worlds of food and nutrition as well as medicine, and basically shows how they need to work together and that it's something that can be done. And that these days sounds somewhat like, oh yeah, there are people doing this, you do this. There are, a dozen or more people who do this a lot now. But 10 years ago, that was pretty new. And I wasn't looking for it. That was the kind of thing which I think maybe is a lesson for life. I wasn't looking for it. And yet it grabbed me and I knew, and I did the very uncharacteristic thing of stepping outside of my safety zone and saying, I'm going to do this. So after that conference where I had that light bulb moment of, this is what I need to make my patients happier and healthier. And this is what I need to actually be a happier primary care doctor. I taught my first cooking class to patients less than a week after that, which is, again, crazy. And it hasn't stopped since then.
That's awesome. What was that first class like? Like, how did you go about advertising it?
It was an interesting thing. It was an experiment. So where I worked at that time had a big research program, and a friend of mine who had also been at that conference, but also who knew that, I like to cook quite a bit. He was a medical director of a research study looking at lifestyle approaches to controlling hypertension. And as part of that, they talked about food, right? This is kind of the thing that we do in medicine. We talk about it, but they didn't do anything to really show people and to give them new tools to help them through food to improve their health. And so he said, we're going to do a grocery store next week. And this grocery store has a community kitchen that we can use. Do you want to teach a cooking class? And my reaction was, oh, that's crazy. I don't know how to teach cooking. I can cook, but teaching is something totally different. He's like, just try it, And so that's how that happened. And so it didn't have to be advertised because it was a captive audience. Captive audience sometimes.
When there's always food, they'll come, right?
Yeah. And so it was the people who were there who were actually already open by being people who enrolled in this study to sort of non-medical ways of approaching their health. And so they're excited. There was, the promise of free food, some fun, and free dinner. Again, these are all things that are very helpful for the work that I do. And that's how it went.
Nice. And because, I'm right there with you, it's not a natural thing, it's for the doctor to be on stage, right? To showcase, something more than the prescription pad. You're showcasing your personality, who you are as a human being, some humor, right? And that helps to resonate, that helps to bridge gaps. Food, as you already know, and I'm sure audiences listening know, is that is usually the centerpiece of how you bring people together, and food is everything. It's economical, it's cultural, it's emotional, it's everything. So I think there's a lot of beauty in that, to kind of, bring that to the conversation, to help make, in our line of work, positive behavior changes. So it's great. I'm so glad that you made the move. And as a person of color, Asian descent, it is also, we talked about this offline as well, also uncharacteristic. So I really applaud you making that step forward, and for others, to lead the way as well.
Oh, thanks, Colin. I mean, right back at
you. So shifting a little bit, can you share with the audience how long you've been in medicine practicing? And then what did you find over time that was, really missing in the healthcare landscape that you felt that culinary medicine, your work, had to bring to light or showcase more of?
Yeah, so I've been in practice for almost 25 years now, which is really a very long time. And at the point where I started doing this, it was about, my 10th year of practicing primary care. And so, I was pretty entrenched. I knew kind of what was standard. I had a feeling of what worked, what didn't work. And my feeling truly at the time, although I wasn't so able to articulate it, was that it wasn't working that well. Like I felt that I wasn't as effective as I could be. I wasn't as creative as I wanted to be. I think I felt kind of trapped by a protocol that nobody was happy with, neither my patients nor myself. And so I think this is something, again, that is missing, is involving the patient in a very active role as truly more of a partnership. I think we are both of, generations which are a little bit different from traditional medicine, where the patient is seen more of as a partner as opposed to being a top-down or authoritative role of the physician. And yet so much of practice is still very much the patient listens to what you tell them to do, as opposed to your asking. And I think this comes from my undergraduate background in medical anthropology, asking the patient, who are you? What do you do? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? How can I help you with this? And it seems so basic. I think to people who do a lot of other jobs, like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Like if you don't know what somebody wants, how are you going to help them with that? But it isn't that common, I think, in medical practice. So I think in general, that sort of partnership model is what is still missing to a large degree in medicine, and something which I love to do through food.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't until, and I resonate the same way, as much as I loved, my schooling, I think my schooling did a much better job than my training in terms of like really speaking to the person. I went to an osteopathic school, and, they were as holistic as you can. And then, it's really about that partnership, that collaborative effort that you have with the patient, and actually sitting them level to level, eye to eye, and, human to human at the end of the day, and say, how can I guide you to where you need to go, as opposed to, let me give you directions, not not cutting them off, right? Like every few seconds. And, seemingly you think where they want to go. And I think that when we spend enough time listening, and being mindful and actually hearing the words that they say, they usually already tell you, not just what's wrong with them, but also like, where they want to go. They just need, our assistance and guidance with it. So
exactly. Yeah. We're on the same page with that for sure.
That's awesome. And on the flip side, can you share with the audience kind of like, what was your impression when you entered into the culinary world after school, and then you went, into working? What was that like? And then what did you find missing from the food world that, from your experiences felt like, okay, there's something that we can do here?
I think this is a really good question, because if I approach it even from the educational model, right, since I'm a cooking teacher right now, is that there's still a lot missing about the focus on how to cook in a way that is health supportive, whatever that means for people, whether that is plant-based or something else, where that's not really emphasized. So that part of my story is, after I had been teaching those cooking classes for 3 or 5 years, I decided to take a sabbatical, self-funded, from work and go to culinary school, which is pretty crazy. Like, I realized that my classmates were young enough to be my children if I had had children at a young age. And that was a little bit weird for me. It was a totally different and fabulous, probably best time of my life kind of experience of, working on a team. We work on teams in medicine, but it's different. I think a really, truly collaborative, pretty equal team, everyone with their roles, but recognizing that each of those roles is equally important in the final product, and then getting the final product, which is delicious, right? It's the food. But most culinary schools, mine included, focus on the French culinary tradition, which has, more butter, eggs, and cream than
salt, sugar,
than you could ever imagine, actually. But when I went to culinary school, and this is kind of my personality also, but I think what one does when you take time off of work is you have to go in with knowing why you're there. So I had a couple of very specific reasons for going. One was to learn cooking techniques, which it doesn't matter what ingredients you're cooking with, like it can be plant-based or not plant-based, but technique is everything. That's crucial for making your food taste good and for kind of just maximizing the possibility that now my students will cook at home. That's really what I wanted. And so I wanted to learn the techniques, and along with that, flavoring techniques, which involve spices, many things other than just salt and pepper, many things other than sugar and fat, right? So even though these are also crucial in the French culinary tradition, you also have to learn how to season things properly, not overdo it, not underdo it. So that was another thing I was very interested in. And then finally, I wanted to learn how to be a good teacher. So as I mentioned, when I first started teaching patients, I was like, all right, I'm gonna go in this and say, okay, you do this, you do that. And it kind of worked. I actually felt like, oh, I'm actually kind of a natural at this and I enjoyed it. And yeah, I knew just like with teaching anything, whether you're teaching medicine, whether you're teaching math, whether you're teaching cooking, there is a better way to do things. So I went there with that. And so I would say that what I got out of culinary school were those things, but there was not an emphasis on, again, health supportive cooking. And I think there's space for this. I mean, there are some programs out there, but not many in person. And maybe putting it out there. I would love to be more involved in that going forward, because I also think, obviously the food business is a business, and it's been a really challenging time with the pandemic for so many wonderful restaurants haven't been able to survive. And now people are starting new businesses. And I think there is actually now in the food world, people are looking towards health a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So from a business perspective, it makes sense if people want to think about this, like, how do we actually get this out there more? Both if you can teach people how to cook this way, then they'll have successful restaurants that serve the kind of food that I think we both would love to eat.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so we can go on forever with this. My good friend, you know Dr. Robert Graham.
Yeah.
We've had this conversation. I had him for another interview, and it's almost like you have different silos going on, right? You have the food industry, you have the health and medical industry, you have the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry. You have all these different players, right, trying to get their own, stuff. It's business at the end of the day. Healthcare is a business, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, our health, individual health, our community health, and now global health, we're all affected, right? The pandemic has shown us that tremendously and a tremendous impact. So it's, in a way, it's almost like, how do we bring conversations together? How do we get people to talk to one another, be on the same page, still, get their own, but still, have enough, to be able to kind of go around the table, share, right? You can, say, in terms of currency, you can say in terms of social currency, you can say in terms of like, that impact that you want to create. So it's a, never ending, battle per se. But yeah, let's circle back to that in a minute. So from fast forwarding, a few years, you are working for Kaiser Permanente, you are working for academic organizations. So far, and you're an author, right? So far, do you feel that the needle has moved, right? In your observations, your experiences so far, do you feel like we've, made a dent, right? We've moved that needle a little bit. And if not, what do you feel needs to happen in order to continue that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I actually think, yes, I think there has been a lot of change in this direction with so many people actually jumping on the bandwagon of this. Both doctors and the public. So doctors who are interested in culinary medicine, who realize the potential of this, who realize the potential of this for their patients as well as their personal career satisfaction. And I think patients are looking for something new too. And this is, again, food is everything. And it's part of everybody's life. And so it's something that everyone can understand and is interested in. So I think that truly in the last 5 years, this movement has grown. And I'm thinking that with the next week's White House conference on food and nutrition and health, that we may see even more of this, that you are bringing together these silos and that we're getting, national governmental attention to this for the first time since the 60s. That's huge. It's huge. And so while, I am not naive enough to think that everything is going to change overnight, I think the needle is moving in the direction that we want it to go. And, I will say, even personally, not to take credit for it, but I think since I started Thrive Kitchen at Kaiser Permanente, which is a huge organization, that many more of these programs have started up as people have seen it and been like, oh, not that they didn't have the idea before, but that they can see it can be done. They can see how easily it can be done if you want to start small, which is what I always advise people to do. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I see different iterations in like Adventist Health and, and even just like individual organizations like True North and, so many different iterations have been, coming up, and it's always exciting. I'm actually on location at the Plantrition Project, and Dean Ornish was, streaming virtually, and he said that he was going to be at that White House conference. So it's really exciting. I'm right there with you. I think because we're both entrenched in it, you could see it, right? You could see it more. And it's really exciting. But definitely, we definitely know that a lot needs to be done, and it's that teamwork, it's that collaborative effort to do it and creating that ripple effect. So one more question is, before we transition to the demo, is what else do you see going on, coming down the pike, coming down the horizon? What is coming up for you that you are, excited that you're going to be working with, that you're happy to see, other companies or other organizations, or, what have you been seeing down the pike that can't wait, that you're happy to see is going on to kind of shift the waves a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think this actually answers all the other questions we've talked about so far today, in that I think a missing link that will be crucial is insurance payment for this, right? So right now, a lot of things are, patients have to pay a fee for. My classes are subsidized by Kaiser. And so from that insurance perspective, it's covered for them, but it's part of that model of prevention. But for most people who are in a fee-for-service model, you have to pay if you want this advice. And that's really hard. I think that limits, certainly it limits for some people whether or not they can get this kind of information at all. So I would love to see, and this is part of what the White House conference is hoping to address and to encourage, is if we can get Medicare to pay for a cooking class as a form of what I like to call applied nutrition, right? This is, again, the tool that the patient will take home, not just the knowledge, but the actual confidence and skills they need to implement this into their lives from this day forward. We need insurance to cover that. And I think we are seeing a little bit of that with medically tailored meals. I'd love to see more of that, but I would love to see not just that, but my cooking classes covered so that in whatever environment, somebody can do that sort of thing. I'm excited by that prospect, and I think it will happen to some degree.
Yeah. Brenda Davis, RD, says it a lot, where, if you can make the healthy choice, the easy choice, it will just lift up the burden through so many different things, health, racial disparities, different socioeconomic classes, food access, everything. So that does, kind of answer that. So yeah, we'll see what happens, and very, very excited to see, because that conversation, I'm sure when you first started 10 years ago, people just kind of look at you with a raised eyebrow. You're like, what? Food as medicine, cooking? Right. Like what was the common naysaying comment or skepticism that you received?
Well, I'll have to say is that when I was doing it where I previously worked somewhere else, because I didn't get enough support for it, because it was thought to be a nice extra, and it's not a nice extra, and I can't volunteer forever, right? So that said everything to me, and that's when I started to look for a place that would understand the concept more, even from a business perspective, that prevention is good healthcare business. It completely is. You save healthcare dollars for things that you really need them for. It's a win-win for everyone. I really think so. And there's so much of what I've done along this path has been like, what? No one's going to do that. Like when I wanted to, when I first pitched my cookbook idea, they're like, why would someone want a cookbook from a doctor? I'm like, no, this is a very special cookbook from a special doctor. Like I went to culinary school. This is basically like my classes in book form so that other people who can't take my classes can, again, make it delicious and easy to do the right thing, which is to do home cooking that will make people healthier and feel good and also really emphasize the pleasure of eating. And so I think because I've been, lucky enough to have success with these sort of unusual things, I'm more like, yeah, that'll work out. Like if this idea makes enough sense that I want to put my energy into it, I feel pretty confident that, working with a lot of different people who have different perspectives is the way to go forward.
Yeah. And I can't emphasize it enough, to really, it's that combination of out-of-box thinking, that application, and then really it's the courage and the guts, to really encapsulate all of that. So again, it's really about leading by example. So I really, again, applaud you. So, so we're going to transition to the demo, and let's get cooking.
All right.
Hey guys, if you are interested in having a consultation with me and actually see me one-on-one, the Chef Doc Lifestyle Medicine practice has partnered with Plant-Based Telehealth, and we offer lifestyle medicine consultations. So you'll be able to see me one-on-one, and I can go over your health history and seeing what we can do to fill in the gaps. We can talk about your physical health, anything from food to lifestyle to diet to setting up your kitchen to cooking preparation to grocery shopping to your mental health. I think it's important that we build our emotional resilience to talking about your sleep and how to stay hydrated and what are the best medicines if necessary, what are the best supplementations if necessary. And we do all this in a very concise manner, and it's a conversation. I take the time out to listen. I take the time out to really understand you from the ground up and to look at all aspects of your physical, emotional, and mental health. And please, drop me a line, schedule an appointment if you want to see me one-on-one. And I am very, very looking forward to learning more about you. And again, thank you so much for visiting here at the Chef Doc.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be demonstrating what I like to call a more complex than it is to actually cook tasting recipe for Kimchi Jigae, which is a kimchi and tofu stew that comes from Korea. This version is plant-based. Most of the time it will not be. Traditionally, it'll have, some sort of meat, usually I think pork or beef in it. But I found that to be completely extraneous to get the essence of this, which is a really comforting, warm bowl of stew that tastes great over rice or some other cooked grain. It's so simple that you really will not believe how easy it is. So first, I'm going to show you the rest of the ingredients that go into it. The first thing is gochujang, which is the fermented chili pepper and bean paste. This is what containers often look like, kind of like a red tub. And that is going to get mixed into some vegetable stock. Can be any kind. Ideally, you make your own from your veggie scraps, but otherwise try to get one that is no added salt or low sodium at least. So be conscious of the salt because other condiments, including the gochujang, will have some sodium in them. So you want to be conscious of that. So I'm just going to whisk this together first. And we'll set that aside because that will be basically our stew braising liquid. So I'm just going to put this in here and whisk it together. And you just want it to dissolve basically into the broth. So what this gochujang tastes like is it's both spicy but not super spicy. It's also sweet. Traditionally, it's made out of fermented barley, although I think a lot of modern commercially available versions are sweetened with added sugars. So you definitely want to read your labels with that. And it has that really nice umami from the fermented beans. So there is a lot of flavor in that very small amount of the paste that we're putting in here. So now it's all basically evenly whisked into our broth here, and I'll set that aside. Other ingredients that are key, and these are all what I think of as being very common ingredients in Korean cuisine for flavor. Lots of garlic. So I've got 6 cloves of garlic here that are peeled and smashed. We have kimchi as well. So this is homemade, but you can use store-bought as well. Be careful if you're making this completely vegan to look for a version that is plant-based, because traditional forms of kimchi are often fermented with these little fish, which obviously are not plant-based. And then we have our tofu. So for this, you can use soft or silken tofu. We want something that is very delicate, but that still holds its shape to some degree. And so I've used soft here, and then I've cut it already into little squares. You'll see how that's going to look when I put it all together. And that is obviously the main source of protein in this. And then we have some green onions or scallions. And then finally, one of my favorite kinds of mushrooms, which are enoki mushrooms, sometimes also called straw mushrooms. So these are really fun. They look kind of like, a magical forest or something. Yeah. And they have a crunch, which is really unusual for mushrooms. So I like to put that in there as well. And then you're going to see how quickly this comes together. So I'm using my induction burner for this. You're going to hear a little bit of a fan, but it's going to be fine. And we're just going to add a very small amount of cooking oil for this, so that we can cook together the garlic and kimchi and get some of the flavor out of it. We're going to get the flavor infusion from the garlic, which we're going to put in first. And we're also going to get flavor, some caramelization by cooking the kimchi in this. So I know you can't see directly into the pot right now, but I'll hold it up at the important points. So I added my garlic, and you can hear that sizzling away. And I'm going to add in my kimchi, which I have chopped up into smaller pieces. And you'll just cook that together. It's like my magic vapors here. Cook it together until you drive out some of that liquid from the kimchi, which is driving the flavor and concentrating it into the kimchi itself. And again, bring out a little bit of sweetness. It smells so good right now. This is actually one of the things I like to tell people, is that the flavor comes from so many layers in your cooking. And that if you start with a flavorful base, no matter if that's spice-based or something that has spices like the chili and garlic in the kimchi, the rest of your food preparation is actually very simple. So for me, making healthy food taste good for people is having people understand that it has to taste good, right? It's kind of breaking with that old concept of long ago where health food was meant to be good for you, possibly in every way except for your soul and feeding your sense of wanting pleasure. And I think you can never separate that out, because nobody will stick with a healthy diet for a long time just because it's good for them. It has to taste good and has to be something that people crave. Okay, so now the kimchi is really fragrant, and I'm just going to hold it up and show you what that looks like inside the pot. Okay, so you see the kimchi there and the garlic. And now for the next step, we're just going to add our cooking broth to it. That's the vegetable stock with the gochujang. I'm going to pour it in. I think that's a pretty dramatic shot for your camera there, right, Colin? Yeah. Little cascade of
cascade, the waterfall of the broth, and the gochujang.
So make sure if you're doing this that you get all of the gochujang into it, because again, that small bit adds a lot of flavor. And then we're going to bring this to a boil. Part of cooking virtually on camera like this is we want to compress it, but what I'm actually cooking is going to be pretty much start to finish, and so you'll see this will come together in 20 minutes, 30 minutes max, including the prep, because as you can see, there are very few ingredients involved in this. And also the proportions are not completely strict, as opposed to with baking. With cooking, you can make a lot of substitutions, especially if you understand the overall concept of the dish. So again, the concept of this dish is it's a brothy stew that is going to be served over rice. So what does that mean? You want a flavorful broth, right? So that when it hits the rice, it'll still have a lot of flavor. You want it to be somewhat soupy. It's supposed to be nourishing, a nice winter or rainy day meal. And as I was telling Colin, it rained yesterday all day, which was very unusual for this time of year in San Francisco. And this would have been perfect yesterday.
Yeah.
And then you want to have your protein of the tofu. So the tofu needs to be in it long enough to soak up all those flavors and not get overcooked where it kind of falls apart, although that's okay too for leftovers. It'll continue to absorb more flavor as you go. And so we want to heat up the broth first so that it's kind of primed for the tofu. It's starting to bubble here, so I am going to add my tofu. So you see it's in these planks here. For aesthetic purposes, I like to kind of put it in a single layer, which I'll show you after I've done it all, on top of the broth. It's gonna be partially submerged, partially floating at the top, kind of like a crocodile, a crocodile in a swamp. You'll see part of its head. And so I'm just gonna put that on top there.
I've actually seen albino crocodiles before.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Okay, so I learned something the other day, possibly true because I saw it on Twitter, that when you see those crocodiles or alligators and you see their head, they're not actually floating, they're standing, they're walking.
Oh, interesting.
Have you ever seen it before?
So I lived in New Orleans for a little bit when I worked at the VA, and I went on this tour, and I've never seen them stand up, but when their head is above the way, it's kind of like their body is just submerged, and it's almost like they're getting ready to lunge or grab their meal or something.
Very interesting. I mean, the picture I saw, again, it was on Twitter, so I don't know if it was real, was in a swimming pool. So it could have cameras underneath, and they literally were walking with their heads like that, which is like, what is that? At any rate, that's what the tofu is going to look like right now, which I'm going to show you. Hold on. Okay, so I'm going to tilt and hopefully not spill it all out. You can see it right there, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, the alligator. Yeah.
So we're going to bring this back to a boil, have it simmer for a while, and then add in our other ingredients, which are going to be the mushrooms, and the very last step, the scallions or green onions. I'm actually going to let this come to a boil just so you can, so I feel like it's at the right temperature to add the mushrooms. You don't want to overcook them. So, these are very simple things, but they're not always obvious to people. Like, why do we do things in stages? Why can't we just dump it all in? Could you just dump this all in together and put it on high and boil it? Yes, you could. But I always like to point out that if you do the techniques in the steps that I've mentioned, there is a reason for all of that. And with a slight bit more effort, meaning just being patient, doing the caramelization first, bring it to boil and simmering the tofu for a while so it absorbs all the flavor more before you add the more delicate ingredients at the end, which you don't want to overcook, you'll have a superior product which you'll really enjoy much more. And again, anybody can do this. All I did was stir fry, boil some stuff together, and then and I'm going to serve it over rice. So this is something for any home cook at any very basic level of cooking. And that is my ideal student. I love it when someone says, like going back to that first class that I taught, where I didn't really know how to teach cooking yet, and where I had a captive audience. I still remember this very grumpy man who looked annoyed the whole time that he had to cook. He wasn't there for that. He looked really irritated. Then at the end of the class, he enjoyed the food a lot, but he still made a point to say to me, and this is actually very interesting to me, to say to me, I'm still not going to cook. I'm still, I live by myself. I'm 60. I've never cooked. Why would I change that now? And I said, okay, but then I had another sort of almost at that point mandatory class that he came to, and he was much more participatory that time. And then a year later, after that program was over, after the study was over, and I was teaching in an adult education class at night, he came to my class, the class he had to pay for, willingly, and he was no longer the scowly man. He was happy, and he said, I cook most days of the week now. I just wanted to come here to learn more from you and let you know that you had a really big impact in my life. And I just thought, oh my God, you like you practically like stormed out of my first 2 classes. And, you know, I guess the point of that is giving people skills is very empowering for them. You know, for me, it's like, it's a little bit of a rush, honestly. Like, I love making an impact on someone's life that way, which honestly, even as a doctor, you never really see that immediate. Like, I'm not a trauma surgeon, so I'm not like stopping the bleeding, right? I don't get the benefit of saying like, oh yeah, that guy was about to bleed out and I saved him. But I get this benefit now, which I never really had before, of this guy was going to continue with his not so great habits of his entire life. And I saved him. I changed the path of his life in a way that was comfortable for him, that he chose to do. No one forced him at this point. And that was a beautiful thing to me. So all of that is to say, I'd love to introduce people to simple recipes that might broaden their idea of what healthy cooking is. This is one of them. Okay, so now it's bubbling away. You can see the steam. And I'm just gonna lay my mushrooms on top. Okay, like this. And this is a big bundle.
And Dr. Linda, can you tell the audience, like, where do you find enoki mushrooms?
So, oh yes, I was talking about substitutions. So kimchi you can find in a lot of large supermarkets these days, and tofu as well, like, you know, regular, like, all-purpose supermarkets. The gochujang is a little bit more difficult to find. If you can't find that, I might substitute either just gochugaru, which is the dried chili pepper that's used in Korean cooking, or but you also want that bean flavor. So you could substitute Chinese doubanjiang, which is the same idea, a spicy bean paste. A Korean would not agree with me, but I promise you'll get the same concept. And if you can't find that, just use any chili powder, whether it is cayenne or chili flakes. You know, you can still do it. It won't be exactly the same, but it will be fine. And then for these mushrooms, you'll have to go to some sort of Asian supermarket for these, a Chinese supermarket, Korean supermarket, a Pan-Asian supermarket. They're going to be a little hard to find elsewhere, although in California, I think we're pretty lucky. You can get a lot of Asian ingredients at like Safeway or something like that. Sorry, I'm just leaning this down. But even though I love these because they're special, they're crunchy, they look cool, they're almost like noodle-like. So for someone who might want to have this without any grain, without any added carbohydrates, you could actually have a noodle sensation from eating these. You can substitute any mushroom, whether it's your plain old white mushroom or some other, any mushroom that you have or that you like would be fine. Does not have to be an Asian mushroom. This is just what I recommend. But again, I want this to be accessible and inexpensive for everybody. So any mushroom will do. And then
I think I would add to that, if is it transports you. You know, if you haven't been to that area, it takes you somewhere, right? And if you have, it takes you back. So I think I highly encourage, you know, to really seek out the ingredient, and if you can't, then substitute. So
exactly. All right, so now this is simmering away, and ideally I would have you simmer this for 10-20 minutes to really get some more flavor into your tofu. Although, you know, you will be getting a lot of flavor from the broth itself. Now is time to add your green onion. And you want these to remain green, so you're not going to boil it for a long time, so you add it at the end. And I'm actually going to bring this closer to you so you can see it. So
yes.
Is that the right, Colin? All right, so let me get some pot holders and bring it closer. Actually, I wonder if I can just push this forward first, and then I don't have to lift up the whole thing. Still have to lift it up. Let me see what I can do here. This is going to be like the magic of television. Let's see if you can see in.
Yeah,
not so well. I think I still need to lift it up, so I'm going to do it very carefully. Right here. Safety first. Okay, there you go. That's what it looks like. Very comforting, very soothing, very simple. And in this case, 100% plant-based. But for people who are omnivores and want to add some other animal-based protein, that's more traditional and also an option. But I really feel truly unnecessary for the enjoyment of the flavors. This is the essence of the kimchi jjigae, which, is like a classic, one eats in one's home on a cold winter night, and a great thing for weeknight cooking. And so it makes a whole pot. This is enough for 4 to 6 servings. If you are, just to give a few more tips to optimize your enjoyment of this, if you know that this is too much for you or whoever you're eating with or yourself, you could make all of it in advance, except for the green onions, and just when you're reheating that portion, and you could even freeze this, cool it, freeze portions, and then bring it back to boil, then add the green onions when fresh when you're bringing it to a boil, so that you have that optimal experience, and it'll be terrific.
It's already terrific. I'm coming over.
You should have extra.
Dr. Linda, thank you so much, for a wonderful presentation, taking us, through your journeys, and super looking forward to where you go next and how you will continue pushing that ripple effect for your patients, your community at large. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you so much for having me, and really same to you. We're part of this unusual group of doctors who cook out there, and we can go further together than on our own, because I think we all have a different niche in this. You're fabulous at this podcasting stuff, for example. And it's a great way of just kind of building the community, which, there's room for many, many more. So I would love to see more colleagues doing this with me.
Yes. For those that are interested in finding your book, finding your website, where can they reach you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so in social media, you can find me at Spicebox Travels on both Instagram and Twitter, where I might be sharing those alligator photos. But most of the food is on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook at The Dr. Spicebox. My blog is spiceboxtravels.com, and you can find my book, as I like to say, wherever books are sold. And so again, that's called Spicebox Kitchen. And I really, again, think of it as a way to share my years now, 10 years of teaching people how to cook in a way that supports health, with a much wider audience than I can do one-on-one in San Francisco.
It's all about that ripple effect. So thank you so much again for a wonderful presentation. And looking forward to, what's to come, like we talked about, for this talk. And I hope to see you soon, very, very soon. So.
All right. Have a great day. And thanks again.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Thrive Bites. If you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel that this is a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And until then, please say goodbye to Dr. Linda.
Goodbye.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you like this, please like, follow, and subscribe. And please follow us for the latest updates for this season 5. And if you feel that this was a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and YouTube. And thank you so much again. And we will see you on the next one.